Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here at our parish mission. We are so happy that you came in from the beautiful weather to be inside. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. We are so thrilled that, Al, that you can join us and present and facilitate this mission. It's very exciting for us. So without further ado, I'll introduce Al and we'll get started. Al McCauley is the Director of Adult Faith Formation at St. Anthony on the Lake Parish in Pewaukee. He taught theology and history at Pius High School in Milwaukee for 24 years and was a religious study adjunct for Cardinal Stritch University. He is the creator of and host of the Catholic weekly YouTube web series Fish on Friday. And if you've never seen it, I highly encourage you to look. Just type in fish. Oh, there you go, on the back page.
QR code.
There it is. There it is.
Advertising.
It is fabulous. It really is. It really is well done. And he is a frequent speaker throughout the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. He earned his master's degree in religious studies from Cardinal Stritch University in 2009. He is married, has 3 children, and should this say 2 grandchildren?
It doesn't say one?
It says 1.
I have 2 grandchildren.
Yeah, I thought so.
Right.
So congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
There they are.
There's one of them. There's the little guy
come
right
on.
there. Yeah.
Oh.
I'll be going now. Thank you. Have a good night.
It is my pleasure to introduce Al McCauley.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Thank you for the warm welcome and for the invitation. I've been here several times to speak with the family program. How many of you have heard me talk before? Oh, you're gluttons for punishment. Good, good, good. Time off purgatory for all of you. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really glad to talk about this topic about Jonah, the book of Jonah in the Old Testament, for a lot of reasons that I'll explain. But I want to start off by saying this. Every year I do at least 1 or 2 Lenten missions at different parishes around the Archdiocese. You've had Lenten missions here before, right? I think Dan Scholes has been here before, so he's top tier guy. So good man to know. When I think of doing a Lenten mission, I don't think of it as me lecturing and you sitting and getting. I think of it as all of us kind of going out of our comfort zone a little bit. So I'm going to ask you, some of you are like, woohoo! So first thing I'll say is I'm hoping you're sitting by someone you like, because I'm going to ask you to talk at times, okay? Is that okay? Do you need to adjust now? Or I'm also going to ask for volunteers to do some readings. Nothing earth-shaking, nothing terrible, but are there enough people here who would be game to say, I can read? Yes? All right, good. When we get to the appointed time, I'm going to let you know what to read. It'll help us all. I'm going to ask you to not just converse with the person next to you, but to all of us, to have a large group conversation at times. And so let yourself be open to that. I hope you will let yourself be open to that, to go out of your comfort zone a little bit, to engage the process. I firmly believe that you'll get more out of it if you do that, and if you're open to that. So that's what I'm hoping for. Now, tonight we're going to look at the first 2 chapters of Jonah in the Old Testament. It's a very brief book. There's only 4 chapters. God bless you. There's only 4 chapters. So we're going to look at the first 2 tonight, and then we're going to look at the next 2 tomorrow night, okay? And we're going to unpack them. There is a whole lot there for us to sink our teeth into. I would suggest to you that the lessons that we can get from Jonah are perfect and ideal for Lent, but I would suggest even more so that they are something that follows us in our day-to-day living. And if we can really apply them, boy, our world would be a little bit better place. I like to think, at least. So we're going to dive right into this. I'm going to start by showing you, first of all, does everybody have a booklet? If you're holding this booklet, you're holding all 4 chapters of the book of Jonah. Okay, in there is the book. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through this with you for a minute, if that's okay. What I thought I would do is start out by reading every word that's on here, even though you have it. No, I'm kidding. I won't do that. Don't you love when speakers do that? Oh my gosh, those are the worst. This is about the book of Jonah. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. The first page 2. Page 3, I'm going to talk about the context of the story. But if you, later on tonight or tomorrow, perhaps you're talking to a friend and say, this guy was talking about Jonah. What was it about? Well, let me look back at my book. Maybe a month from now, you'll look, what was that knucklehead saying? Well, it's in the book. You've got it all there. Starting on page 4, you have the text of Jonah, the book of Jonah from the Old Testament, okay? starting on page 4. And the thing that you should notice right away is that there's margins on the right side. If you are a note taker, you may want to scribble notes in here. This is yours to keep forever and ever, amen. So if you want to write notes, you can. If you don't, that's fine too, but I wanted to at least afford you the opportunity if you are that kind of a mission goer. And then you'll see we have, if you continue, just go all the way through it real quick to page 9, you will see there are reflection questions that correspond with each of the 4 books. Okay, so at the end of this, I don't know if Sue told you this, there's going to be a test. So how well you pay attention, no, I'm kidding, of course. I taught high school for 24 years. You know, there's 2 things I'll never have to do again: take attendance and grade papers. Anybody here a former teacher or a current teacher? Would you agree with that? It's like, woohoo, don't have to do that anymore. I loved teaching, I really did. But anyway, so some of those questions we're going to unpack throughout the course of tonight and tomorrow, but they're there for your further reflection on your own. So you have something that you can kind of chew on throughout the rest of Lent. Next week is Holy Week, but you can, chew on them even beyond Lent into the Easter season. And then if you want, there's a place for notes. Again, if you're a note taker. And on the back, you have the schedule for today and tomorrow, what we're going to look at, and then my little shameless plug for my web series. I make no money off of it. It's just a way to evangelize. That's really all it is. 5 to 7 minutes of a life of a saint or a piece of art or a church teaching that I try to unpack. That's all it is. So if you're interested, know that you are free to do that. All right, are we ready? All right, I'm going to start with some background information here. This one is, okay, we're went too fast. There we go. Okay, so one line at a time. There, look at that. All right. So what do we know about Jonah? Very quickly, just to get us a logistical start to this book in the Old Testament. Jonah is what we call a minor prophet. It doesn't mean he's not important. It means that of all the prophetic texts in the Old Testament, his is one of the shorter ones. So he's considered minor because of that, as opposed to Isaiah, which is one of the biggest. It is the biggest, in fact. So that's why he's called a minor prophet. There are 12 minor prophets, and he's one of them. There's some differences about Jonah relative to all the other prophetic texts in the Old Testament. And this is one of the glaring ones. All the other prophets are a series of oracles or sayings that God is asking them to say to people. It's only Jonah that we get a narrative. In other words, a story about the prophet, as opposed to words the prophet has to say. Does that make sense? So it's really a story, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. This story's got humor, it's got drama, it's got intrigue, it's got everything you could possibly imagine. We don't know exactly when it was written. The thought is it was written about 5th century BC, but nobody knows for sure. We know the principal place that he went. Does anybody know the city God asked Jonah to go to? Nineveh. Some of you know this story, right? You've heard this before, you've read it. And when we were kids, we heard this story. What did we always remember? Jonah and the whale, right? Would you be surprised if I told you it wasn't a whale? Anybody here like to fish? Anybody ever go fish? Do you know what a fish story is? Right? This is a fish story. It's not a whale story. But we'll talk about that. Believe me when I tell you, we will get into that a little bit. If not tonight, certainly tomorrow night. But it was written around 5th century. Nineveh, the main city, was destroyed in 621. We do know that. So we believe it was sometime after the destruction of Nineveh. Another thing I want to ask you about to consider is this account fictional, made up, totally made up, or is it an actual reluctant prophet? Is Jonah a real guy? So at the end of these 2 days, my hope is that you'll form some opinion. Was this just a story to teach us a lesson, or was Jonah a real person in history? I'm not going to tell you what I think. I will let you come to your own conclusion on that. All right, let's talk about Nineveh a little bit. Oh, by the way, Jonah is also the only book in the whole Bible that ends with a question. Now, what some of you are thinking is, I'm going to skip ahead and look at what the question is. And you may, that's okay. But it's the only book in the Bible that ends in a question. All right, so what do we know about these places? Nineveh, we do know that it's a very big city. We're told in the book that it's going to take Jonah how many days to cross it? 3 days to cross it. The very last verse of the book of Jonah, God says there are over 120,000 people that live there. Do you know how many people live in New Berlin? About 45,000-ish, right around there. 120,000 in the ancient world, that is huge. That is a huge city. Again, we're talking at least 5-6 centuries before Christ, so that's a really big city. Who are the people that live in Nineveh? They're the Assyrians. And we need to know who they are to understand the context of Jonah. And I would suggest we probably all have Assyrians or Ninevites in our lives. That's something else you're going to want to think about as we go through this. Who are the Assyrians? They're a cruel and barbarous and militaristic people. People do not like the Assyrians, neighboring people, because they're always out to get people. They're always taking them over. I'm going to give you some evidence of that as we go on. But it's interesting to note that God is going to send Jonah to this city filled with people who are known, who have a reputation as cruel torturers, okay? So keep that in the back of your mind. I mentioned this already. It's a large fish, not a whale, but we'll talk about that as we go on, so buckle up for that. And then the last thing I'll say is, in a way, Jonah might have thought this was like a suicide mission. This is what God is telling him to do. I want you to go and tell those people who are cruel torturers to get their act together. You know? And he's probably thinking, what will they do to me? And in the booklet, I make the analogy, it's kind of like asking a Jewish rabbi to go in 1941, to go in the center of Berlin, Germany, and start telling the Nazis to get their act together. How do you think that's going to go? So when we hear about Jonah's reluctance to do what God wants him to do, we can kind of forgive him a little bit because he's being sent to the worst place he knows. But still, it's God's will, and so is he going to follow it or not? All right, logistics. You need to know geography, and it might be hard for where you're at to see this, but go back in time to your high school world history class. Weren't those good times? We're in the Middle East. Somebody said no. I taught history now, come on. This green area is called the Fertile Crescent. Does that sound familiar? Do you remember that? Now, the Fertile Crescent is situated over the two primary rivers at the time that were of great importance, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Mesopotamia, Mesa meaning middle, Potamia means river. It's the middle between the land between the two rivers. And so that's the Fertile Crescent. Okay, and it goes all the way down to Ur in the south over here, which is Babylon. That's where Abraham starts in Genesis 12, and he's going to go all the way around over here. Why doesn't he just cut across the desert, do you think? Why doesn't anybody? You don't want to die, right? You're going to stay along the river route. That's what you're going to do. And so most great civilizations in the ancient world are going to situate themselves by water. Why do you want to be by a river in the ancient world? What does the river do for you? Life, because it gives you the irrigation, it gives you water to drink. What else? Transportation, what? Movement of goods, foods, all that kind of stuff, exactly. And so if we look at the very northern part of this, imagine that like a croissant, at the very top of it, you're going to see in purple there, the city of Nineveh. Now, if you put that in today's map, it would be in northern Iraq. If you're familiar with Iraq, the city of Mosul, Nineveh is in the city of Mosul, Iraq. Okay? So just to give you a sense of that. Like I said, it's a population of 120,000. To prepare for this mission, I drew this picture last night, so you just want to make sure you're still paying attention. This is an artist's rendition. It was situated on the Tigris River, so it's a very, very populous city, very wealthy city, but again, a militaristic people. You could tell that they have temples, so they're very religious, but they're polytheistic. They have many, many gods, okay? That looks like a nice place to vacation. So what you're seeing there is the inside, again, an artist's rendition of the inside of their temple. And you see some of their gods, and you see the two statues of the half bull, half man. And they have other ones I'm going to introduce you to, at least one more I'm going to introduce you to. But you see in the reliefs here, what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of military designs. You see chariots and charioteers and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is where it gets kind of bad. But you know what? We have to know who these Assyrians are, the Ninevites were. I'm going to show you several different depictions of reliefs. In other words, carvings that they did about their own lives. Okay? So here you see them, a warrior type of mindset, militaristic type of people, okay? with arrows and spears and the like. Now, this image, and there's going to be some boxes I'm going to bring up here, so just so you know that. This image shows a lot of the cruelty of the Assyrians. So at the very top, around that white box that you see appearing, you're seeing people a man who has been tied down, staked down to the ground, and he's being flayed alive, skinned alive. So I'm trying to give you the sense of who Jonah's going to, okay? In the middle of this relief, you see somebody who is being clubbed to death. And at the bottom, what you see is a man whose tongue is being cut out from his mouth. So, not necessarily the next door neighbors you'd like to have, okay? Some cruel people. To keep going, there's another relief that you see, and there's several things going on here. The first one, he is going to have his head cut off, and I'll bring that about in a minute. If you look at the middle picture, you see this man has no feet and no hands. It would be normal for them to take prisoners of war and to cut their hands off at the wrists and their feet off at the ankles. And then if you go further to the right, you see two different things. You see a man impaled, and you see the skulls or the heads of victims placed around the entrance of the gate of the city. Why are they doing that? It's a warning. This is what's going to happen to you if you get out of line, if you cross us somehow. And then the last one, just to prove the point of how bad they were, they drew this, by the way. They're drawing this, they're carving this into the stones of their building by themselves. But this is people who are impaled alive. Now, don't think of like Vlad the Impaler, if you know who that is, Dracula, right? That's almost 2 millennia after these folks. So it's a really brutal place. Okay, I've set the tone. We know where we're at, and we know what's going on and who we're dealing with. Ready? Are we ready to go into Jonah? All right, let's get it. You're all thinking, I thought we were going to get into this book here. So let's look at Jonah 1 together. So this is what I'd like. If you open up to page 4, please, you'll see the text, and you'll see where it says the headline is Jonah tries to run away from God. This is a Catholic, by the way, a Catholic translation of this. And you know how the little verses work in the Bible, right? Chapter 1, and then what I'd like is somebody who would read out loud verses 1 to 3. Who would like to do that? Oh, and Sue's going to you're going to be like Phil Donahue, bringing around. I can't say that to kids. They don't know who Phil Donahue is. I'm so glad you laughed at that reference. Yes, caller, you wanted to say. Go ahead. Remember those days? All right. 1 to 3, if you don't mind. Somebody had their hand up. Great. Thank you. And then all of us just read along, or in our minds, quietly.
Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid his fare and went aboard to journey with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord.
Thank you. Excellent job. So there's some things I want to talk about real quick, logistically. Tarshish is have you ever heard of that city? Tarshish is in southern Spain, okay? So if you look at this, let's see what, we got again, it's context to understand what Jonah's doing here. So you see where Joppa is. He went down to Joppa, which is near the Middle East where we're familiar with, right? And he's going to go, what's this body of water in the middle called, do you know? The Mediterranean. Meta meaning middle, terrain meaning earth. It's the middle of their known world. So I'm going to stand over here for a minute. In your mind's eye, picture a whole world map, okay? Can you do that? The people at Jonah's time had no idea that across this ocean there's something called North and South America. They have no idea how far south the continent of Africa goes. They have no idea that there's this island continent called Australia over here. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is their known world. So when we say that he is going to flee to Tarshish, he's going to Spain. This is literally the end of the world. He is going as far away as he could possibly physically get from God. So it's not just a throwaway to say he went to Tarshish. It means something. And as the map indicates, instead of going to Nineveh, which was about a little over 500 miles, he's going to go, I'm bad at math. Somebody tell me, is that 5 times as much? At least 4 times. I'm terrible with math. I don't have enough fingers. But he's going to go 2,500 miles away. to get away from the will of God. Which begs the question, rhetorical question, how many times to what distances, what lengths would we go to avoid the will of God in our lives? You know, maybe not getting on a plane and going as far away as possible, but it's an interesting thing to think about Jonah doing that. All right. So we're going to continue hearing the story here. So, boy, I'm going to have you working tonight, Sue. Would anybody like to read 4 through 6? Oh, sweet.
But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and such a mighty storm came upon the sea that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried to his God. They threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. Jonah, meanwhile, had gone down into the hold of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. The captain came and said to him, "What are you doing, sound asleep? Get up, call on your God. Perhaps the God will spare us a thought so that we do not perish."
Thank you. Does any of that sound familiar to any New Testament story? Who else fell asleep on a boat during a storm? Jesus did, right? There's so much about this book that points to Christ, and it points to our life as Christians. It's really kind of uncanny how that is. So a lot of this I'm going to point that out to you. Now, the sailors and the captain, they're on this ship. A ship in the ancient world is the most cosmopolitan place ever. Meaning it's going to be people from all different cultures, all different religions, all different countries, and it's a hodgepodge of people who are coming together willing to go away from family and friends on a long journey. That's not a job for everybody. So it's a collection of a ragtag misfits, if you will, but it's also a collection of people who are different. That's why the captain is saying, "Who's your God? You know, call on your God." They all have their own gods that they're praying to, okay? And he's trying to get Jonah to kind of wake up and pray to his God too. They need all the help they can get because this storm is pretty fierce apparently. Would somebody like to read from 7 through 10? 7 through 10. Okay, wherever you want to go, Sue. Thank you.
You bet. The sailors said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, so that we may know on whose account this calamity has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, "Tell us why this calamity has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?"
You can keep going. Thanks.
"I am a Hebrew," he replied. "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were even more afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them so.
Thank you. So again, there's a lot that's going on here. First of all, they're in a storm and they're afraid they're going to die. And yet they have time to cast lots and ask a series of questions, you know? It's kind of like if you're in peril and you think you're going to die, I always kind of find that funny that they've got time to have a conversation with Jonah about this. Casting lots is just an ancient way of, it could be rolling colored stones, it could be picking, it's like our modern version of flipping a coin. But casting lots in a biblical sense means we're leaving it up to God as opposed to some bias on our part, okay? So they're trying to figure out which of them is really the cause of this storm. And that's the problem that they're facing. How do they react when he says, "I'm a Hebrew"? They become more afraid. So that should tell us something. What do those people think about the Hebrew God? They know his reputation is not bigger than Jonah. So they know of this and they're like, "Oh my, your God is more powerful than ours." They're almost admitting. And they're saying, there's something wrong here. If you're the Hebrew, you have a Hebrew God, and this storm, it's got to be something you did. But it's going to be interesting to see how they react. Who would like to read 11? Well, 11 through 16. 11 through 16. You're getting your steps in, Sue.
That's good. I need my steps today.
No, you don't need steps. Good exercise. Okay. So 11 to 16.
Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea was growing more and more tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great storm has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more stormy against them. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, O Lord, we pray, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not make us guilty of innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked Jonah up and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord even more, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Well, you got it. Okay. No, it's good. A lot going on there. What I'd like to do is go back to, let me see, verse 12, the last part of verse 12, when Jonah says, "Pick me up and throw me in. It's because of me that this great storm has come upon you." What I'd like you to do is, if you go to page, now hold your finger there and go to page 9. And in reflection questions for Jonah 1, the fourth question, I would love for you to turn and talk to somebody just for a minute or two. Just talk about that. What does Jonah's storm reveal about God's power? And then how are we often the cause of our own storms? You don't have to be overly personal, by the way. You don't have, this is not confession. So, you could be as open or broadly based as that as possible. Do you understand what I'm asking? Just a minute or two, just talk to somebody next to you or around you. The fourth question under reflection questions for chapter 1. Okay? And then I'll call you back. Sound good? All right. All right, I'm gonna call you back if I may. I always feel bad if people are having good conversations, but that's why God invented Denny's. So you can continue the conversation after this or tomorrow morning at breakfast or something. So what is anybody want to share with the large? When I talk with adults, I always say adults learn best from each other, by talking to each other and learning from each other. And there's collective wisdom that you have, and a lot of times adults don't think they have it, but they do. What does Jonah's storm reveal about God's power? Did you talk about that? Anybody want to share what they talked about? What does it tell us about God, like about God's power? Yes, please. That God was relentless. God's going to chase him. He's going to keep at it until, and you're going to find that out throughout the rest of the story, that God is rather relentless when he pursues us, and it's, in this case, he wants Jonah to do something. But it's true of all of us, isn't it? Isn't God's mercy relentless? Isn't his grace relentless? Isn't his love for us relentless? The fact that we wake up every morning is not something we've decided to do. It's something that's gift. It's relentless. God woke us up this morning, so he wants us to do something. How are we going to spend our day, I love that. It's a great idea, a great point. Anything else that you talked about with that question? What does Jonah's storm reveal about God's power? Yeah. You can't hide from God, that is for sure. Absolutely can't hide from God. Yeah, exactly. Who's in control of the storm? Is it Jonah because he was thrown in? No, it's God. God is, when we think about creation and we think about how God created everything, when Jesus dies and he rises, he doesn't just redeem humanity, he redeems everything. All of creation is redeemed. All of creation sings out in praise. And so when you think about the storm, this is just one more way God is working through nature in this case to get a message across. Can you relate to that? Have you ever seen God in nature? Have you ever experienced God, in a scary moment or in a beautiful moment, a sunny, a beautiful sunset, a starry night, whatever the case is? We can see God in nature. He reveals himself. He's always tapping us on the shoulder, turning us back to himself. What about the second part of that question? Again, I don't want you to be overly personal here, okay? How are we often the cause of our own storms? Jonah says that, the storm's because of me. Do we often cause our own storms? Please, sir. Absolutely. 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 And if we do the wrong thing, chances are maybe a metaphorical storm is going to pop up, right? Anybody else on that one? Do you see that in our society today, that sometimes we are the cause of our own problems oftentimes? We get in our own way too much. We do things that at least might not be the cause of it even, but don't help the situation. We tend to do that. We tend to bring this on ourselves. And so I just think it's interesting to think about. So if we go back to the text, how did the sailors respond when Jonah's chucked over the side of the boat and now the storm stops? How do they respond? They started praying to God. They offered a sacrifice to the Lord and they made vows. They made vows. So the last question in section 1 says, how do the sailors' fear and worship of God contrast with Jonah's actions? Jonah's a Hebrew. He should know better. How do the sailors, all of these different cultures, these different religions, they react by worshiping God? How is that different from Jonah? He's running away. So think about this. We hear this all the time. Last week we heard about Lazarus being raised from the dead. The week before that we heard about the man born blind, right? And the Pharisees, when these miracles happen, it's like the Pharisees aren't celebrating that this guy has sight. They're angry because you did it on the Sabbath, or we don't know who you are, from what authority are you doing this? And so like there's a problem with that. You'd think they would be celebrating these miracles, right? And it's kind of like Jonah doesn't get it. He should know better. The Pharisees should know better, and they don't. And who are the people who come to believe in Christ? It's the Samaritan woman at the well. Not a Jew, not a man, a Samaritan woman. She comes to faith, and she's the first one who goes into Samaria to tell the people about Christ. And so the people who are understanding the power of God, are the people you wouldn't expect. The person who should get it is Jonah, and he doesn't. He's kind of like a Pharisee in a little bit of a way. I want to go back now to page 5 and just finish this. The last line, I purposely didn't have you read. I'm going to say this, but the Lord sent a large fish, to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Sound familiar? Yes, tomorrow we're going to emphasize that even more, not tonight, but tomorrow. But there's something I want to point out about this in the first chapter before we bring it to a close, and it's this. I have to show. Okay, hit the back button. I'm sorry. This is my, I thought I'd animate my little map here, okay? So we're gonna watch the map. Okay. There's the boat. There's the fish. There you go. Okay. There's the boat, and there's the fish. Okay. There we go. Yes, I know. That's as close as I could get. So he's on the boat, and then he's in the whale. So he's in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. I want to point out something. These 3 words in the first book of Jonah. We're told in verse 3 that he goes down to Joppa. And then we're told in verse 5 that he goes down into the hold of the ship. And then we're told in verse 17 that he goes down into the belly of the fish, which is down in the sea. And I don't want that directioning to be lost on us. The fact that he is going down in all 3 of those situations tells me that there's nowhere else to go but up, hopefully. But would you agree with this, that sometimes we learn the greatest secrets about God in our lives when we're at our lowest point? I would be willing to bet if we went around and everybody could share and wanted to share, you could point to a low point in your life, something that was tragic, something that was hurtful, something that was bad, but you could also say how I've grown from it. And if nothing else, you could say, that's when I needed God the most. When I was at my lowest point is when I needed God the most. And I think that lesson has to be learned for some people. It's harder to learn that lesson. And for Jonah, it had to be, it wasn't enough to go to Joppa or to get on a boat or even to get into fish. We'll have to see if the fish thing, converts him or not as we go on. But it's something to think about. I love using art when I teach, and this is a tapestry actually it's from a Bible from the 4th century, but it shows Jonah. I wouldn't want to be swallowed by that fish. That looks pretty mean and unsettling to me. There's a grief expert going on in what I was talking about before. Jonah can't run anymore. He's alone with his God. What would you do if you were in the belly of a fish for 3 days? Pray? That's what he's going to do. What did you say? Yeah, hope I wasn't being digested. To think, it sounds kind of silly to think about it, but what would you do? Could you see? Would you just grope around? What would you do with this? It would have to be weird. It would be very, very unsettling, I would think. But where's he going to go? He can't go anywhere. He's a captive, and he's alone with his God. And so now he has to come to some reckoning. Would you agree that oftentimes when we pray the most fervently is when we're in a bad place like that? Yeah. And so this is what he's going to do. He's going to turn to prayer. Before I get to the prayer, before we collectively get to the prayer, though, I want to put this up. This is a guy named David Kessler, and he's a grief expert, a renowned grief expert. And I just want to put the line up there and have you think about this, because I think it's pretty interesting, especially in relation to Jonah and then by extension to us. What we run from pursues us. What we face transforms us. What we run from pursues us. What we face transforms us. Even if we take difficult situations, even if it's an emotional situation, but if we take little steps at a time, it may not all disappear, but we're facing it and something's changing. We are being transformed. If we can face it at least a little bit at a time, we can heal. We can bring about a change or a transformation. Would you agree with this line, by the way, from your own experience? I can tell you I've run from things in my life, figuratively, metaphorically, I've run from things in my life, and you know what? They're still dogging me because I go to bed and I can't sleep, and when I do sleep, I'm dreaming or I'm fitful, and right? We have these things happen. And it's not until okay, now I'm going to actually face it. I'm going to have the conversation, the difficult conversation, or I'm going to do the difficult thing. Oftentimes, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, as I made it out to be. But almost always, I try to make it include prayer, because that's really what it's about. Now I'm going to ask you another question. I'm going to put 2 questions up here and see what you think about this, okay? Because I'm going to get hung up on the fish thing, okay? And there's a method to my madness, so go with me on this. I believe that the question isn't, is there a fish big enough to swallow Jonah alive? The question should be, is God big enough to create and command a whale? Because if you tell anybody this story that's above the age of about 8, maybe 6, Kids know this story. They know Jonah and the whale. And if you ever know, you see kids' books, they got these little cartoony things, and they've got even plush animals and whales and stuff. And it's a cute story. And that's it. That's just Jonah and the whale, and you know, he was spit out, and then, oh yeah, hey, and that's not how it ends at all. But the older we get, the more likely, and I'll bet many of you are sitting here tonight thinking, I just don't know if he was really, come on, 3 days in a fish. And I'm not judging that. I don't know what I think about that, but I wonder if we need to flip our perspective a little bit. Instead of saying scientifically, biologically, can a human being exist for 3 days in the belly of a great fish? Should I be asking, is my God big enough to do these things? I don't know. Rhetorical question, but it's an interesting question. When you think about the miracles that Jesus performs, that God performs in the Old Testament, and then Jesus through the New Testament, is this any more outlandish? I don't know. Splitting the Red Sea. You've all seen Charlton Heston, right? 10 Commandments. That's a pretty remarkable feat right there, you know? Water from a rock. You know, when you think about all the different miracles that we think about and take for granted, I don't know, it's just something to think about, to reframe maybe our perspective. All right, this is what I'm going to do next. We're going to go into Jonah 2, and this is all prayer except for the last line. But I'm going to need 9 volunteers to read, I'm going to read chapter 2, but I'm going to ask people to read a corresponding Bible verse. Am I making sense with that? So you're going to see, if you see chapter 2, verse 2, that means I'm going to read that, and then I'm going to ask that person who has this one to read this line. Am I making sense? Okay, so I need 9 people who will be willing to do that. I'm giving you all the work tonight, too. I appreciate that. Are any of you lectors? So there you go. So look at that. We got the veterans here. What Sue is handing out, just so you know, what Sue is handing out are 9 different verses from the book of Psalms. In the Old Testament, the book of Psalms were written between 1400 and 400 BC. Do you know how many there are? How many Psalms are there? Yeah, 150. And David is largely attributed to writing them all, or at least writing a lot of them. But we believe they were compiled between 1400 and 400 BC, over 1,000 years. Any good Jewish boy growing up, before you reach the age of maturity, you're going to have memorized a lot of these. And this sounds foreign to our modern ears, but think about this. If you're growing up in a Jewish household, you're learning and hearing these psalms repeated situationally, a psalm of praise if something good's going on, a psalm of lament if something bad's going on. You're hearing these over and over again. You know, you're hearing them from your mom and your dad and your grandparents, and you're hearing them from older siblings, and you start to repeat them. And you might say, well, man, how do we get to that point? They have no TV, they have no internet, they have no movies, they have no books. They don't have any of those, they don't go to sports games or teams. They don't have soccer practice or play practice. They don't have any of that stuff. And they don't know any better. But this is the point, is they are going to have these psalms memorized. And how do we know this? We know this, and we see this scripturally. I would ask you to really pay attention to the Passion account, especially this coming Sunday. Matthew's Passion account. Matthew is writing to a group of people who are Hebrew Christians, and he is referencing the Psalms time after time. He has Jesus referencing the Psalms. Jesus is on the cross, and he's dying, and he's going to say, "Why have you forsaken me?" That's a psalm. I'm telling you this because Jonah's in a situation now where he's in the belly of a whale, and he's going to pray. And he's going to pray the prayer that's most comfortable to him. So if you imagine yourself in a bad situation, something's going on, you got some bad news, you're really, really stressed out, you're going to go to the go-to prayers, aren't you? What would they be for Catholics? Our Father, Hail Mary. I always tell this story, true story. When my mom passed away about 8 years ago, I'm one of 6 kids. All 6 of us were around the bed at the hospital where my mom was. And literally the last words on her mouth were the Hail Mary. She was praying the Hail Mary repeatedly. She loved Our Lady, and she loved praying the rosary. And she was praying the Hail Mary as she passed away. Now, why was she saying that instead of she was a big Chicago Cubs fan? Why wasn't she saying, boy, those Cubs are going to win the pennant this year? They're going to go to the World Series. She wasn't. Because when you're up against it, what do we go to? We go to the things that give us comfort, those things that we know work, those things that mean something to us. And so Jonah, I'm building this all up because I want you to understand Jonah's in the belly of a whale. You can't get more dire straits than that. And he's going to go back to what he knows, and that's the Psalms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reading in chapter 2. And then if you look at the little box on the right, you see where it says chapter 2, verse 2a. Whoever got that slip of paper, you see that at the top. That's when it's your turn to read that psalm. Psalm 130, verse 1. Am I making sense? Everybody knows what they're doing? Oh, this is great. Aren't you excited? This is going to be great. Because you know what? We're getting 2 books for the price of one. We're going to be multitasking. We're going to be reading Jonah and Psalms, interchangeably. That's a good thing. All right, so here we're going to start on page 5, I'm going to start chapter 2, a psalm of thanksgiving. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Out of the depths I cried to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Great. 2b, who had Psalm 88?
The God of my salvation, day and night I cry out to you. Let my prayer come before you. Give ear to my cry for help. My soul is filled with misery, and my life draws near to Sheol.
So, do you understand what we just did there? I'm not going to do the stop every time and ask, but the first, that whole verse that he just prayed is echoing of 2 different psalms. Almost, in some cases, almost word for word. Time out, put all that on the back burner. When you read Sheol, are you familiar with that term? Sheol is the Jewish understanding of the afterlife, where a soul waits in a state of happiness, natural happiness, for the Messiah to take them to see God face to face. Okay? Now that's an important line for Catholics, and I'll tell you why, to know that. Because when we pray the Apostles' Creed, we say Jesus died and he went to hell or descended to the dead. The translation is he went to Sheol and then he rose again. What's he doing in Sheol? He's the Messiah, freeing all of those souls, Abraham and Sarah and David and Rebekah and Leah, all of those Old Testament people who have died, Noah. He's going down there on Holy Saturday night to Sheol to say, we're free. You're going up with me now to heaven. Does that make sense? That's what Sheol is. So when we pray the Apostles' Creed and we say Jesus descended to the dead or into hell, really what the translation is, he's descended to Sheol, meaning Jesus is the Messiah. But in the Old Testament times, like what he's reading, what Jonah's saying, and what the psalmist is referring to, they don't know of Jesus yet. So they're saying, I'm in the netherworld, man. I'm in this state of being that I haven't seen God face to face yet. Does that make sense? All right, that was into the weeds a bit. Now we're going to put this all on the back burner and we're going to keep going, okay? So I'm going to go back to now verse 3. You cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All of your waves and your billows passed over me. Psalm 88.
You have lowered me into the depths of the pit, into the darkest regions of the abyss. Your wrath lies heavy on me. All your waves engulf me.
Again, very similar to what he's saying. Verse 4, then I said, I am driven away from your sight. How shall I look again upon your holy temple?
I had cried out in terror. I have been cut off from your sight.
Okay. Verse 5, the waters closed in over me. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. Psalm 60.
Lord, you lifted me up from the netherworld. You saved me from sinking into the pit.
At the roots of verse 6, at the roots of the mountains I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. Psalm 30. That's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Save me, my God, for the waters have risen to my neck. I am sinking in muddy depths and can find no foothold. I have fallen into deep waters, and the floods overwhelm me.
Okay, so those two have reversed. Do you understand that? Yeah. Okay, good. But we're still getting the same gist of it. So we're going on to verse 7. As my life was ebbing away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple.
But I will enter your house because of your great kindness, and I will bow down in your holy temple, filled with awe of you.
Excellent. Verse 8, those who worship vain idols forsake their true loyalty.
Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and fulfill your vows to the Most High. Then if you cry out to me in time of trouble, I will rescue you and you will honor me.
Okay, so that would be for the next verse, but that's okay. So can you read that? Do you have the next one? Those who worship vain idols forsake their true loyalty.
You who hate those who cling to false idols, but I put my trust in the Lord.
Great. And then the last verse, verse 9, but I with the voice of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Deliverance belongs to the Lord, which is recapping what she just said. So my point of doing this exercise, thank you very much. Thanks for reading, everybody. Good job. And Sue, thank you. The point of this exercise, again, is to make us see and understand that Jonah is doing what all of us do, I would say, is returning to a prayer of comfort, going back to something that he feels works, something that he knows. When you're alone like this in a dark place, that's what we do. We tend to cling to that comfort. Now, there's something else about this psalm that he says, the psalm of thanksgiving, and I put it on the left margins, and I think it's interesting to point this out, that the psalm of thanksgiving that Jonah reads has 3 parts to it. And again, I put this on the left side of the margin there. Verses 2 to 4 is really a prayer of admission. He's saying, I goofed up, man. I screwed up. I've done something wrong. He's admitting his fault. 5 to 7 is a prayer of restoration. He's asking and acknowledging that God can, listen, I screwed up, but you can make this right. You can do this, God. You are the powerful one. You can do this. And then the last 2 verses of that, 8 and 9, are a prayer of appreciation or thanksgiving. Now, why is that important? I think it's important because that is a great method of prayer. Because let me ask you this. If most people pray, what are they doing when they're praying? What type of prayer is it, would you say? I don't mean like Hail Mary, but what kind of prayer are they praying? Say it louder. Petitions, they're asking for stuff usually, right? Aren't you and I doing that all the time? 90% of our prayers, not judging, do it all the time, if not more, are help me, Lord, help this person, Lord, I need this, Lord, come to me, Lord, right? I need these things. And what Jonah's doing is giving us a template of saying, can we have contrition? Can we say, I admit that I need you? Can we get to the point where we say, you, Lord, can restore me? I can't do this on my own. You can restore me, Lord. Just as an aside, if you know anybody who's ever gone through the 12-step program, the first 2 steps of the 12-step program are A, admitting that I have a problem that I can't do anything about, and I need the help of a higher power to overcome it. Call it God's grace. And that's what Jonah's doing. He's admitting, and then he's saying, restore me, Lord. You can do it because I can't. Can Jonah get out of the whale by himself? But you know who can? God can do it for him. And before it happens, the last 2 verses, he says 8, 9, he says what? Thank you. So think about that just in terms of, and when I say think about this, I'm talking to myself. This is therapy for me. This is spiritual therapy for me. As much as I'm saying it to you, I'm saying it for myself. Do I admit my wrongdoing to God in my prayer? Do I ask him to restore me because I can't do it, to put myself on the right path? I can't do it by myself. And then do I say thank you? Or am I too busy asking for what I want, when I want, and how I want it? You know what I mean? As if God's like some cosmic vending machine that I put my prayer into and then hit the button and, you know. It's just something to think about. And then verse 10, so all of chapter 2 is a prayer. All of chapter 2 is a prayer except the last line. The last line, then the Lord commanded the fish to spew Jonah out upon the shore. Which is kind of gross when you think about it, because what do you think he looks like and smells like? 3 days in the belly of a fish. This is what I'd like you to do. I'm going to ask you to talk to each other again. I've talked a lot, so I want you to talk to each other again. If you turn to page 9, the first question of the reflection questions in chapter 2. Oh, this is a good one. Do you think the large fish is a metaphor or is it a miracle? And I have no preconceived answers to that. I'm not looking for anything. I would love for you to talk to each other. What do you think when you hear this story? We've gotten halfway through it now. What do you think? Is this a metaphor, just like a fable, or is this a miracle? Did this really happen? So just turn and talk to each other. Have at it, and I'll call you back in a minute or two. It's a great question, I think. You're going okay?
So would like to ask a question.
Oh, okay. I could repeat it, what they say. I tried to do. Okay, all right. How are we doing? Do you have a firm answer? I would love to hear what you talked about in your groups. So, metaphor or miracle, what did you say? Anybody want to start us out? Well, explain why. Why do you say metaphor versus miracle? Anybody? Yes. Both? Now, I'll ask the rest of you, is that like an easy way out? Come on. It's A, miracle, B, metaphor, C, both, all of the above. No, I'm kidding. You said both. Why? I'm sorry, say it again. I apologize.
Because God works in metaphors and in miracles. I mean, he does both things.
Yeah.
And I also think that the 3 days in the fish belly kind of goes with the New Testament and what's coming up for Triduum.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of threes out throughout the whole Bible, so that's definitely a good. So both. Anybody say no? It's one, absolutely one or the other. Yes, sir.
I was going to say metaphor. To me, it's similar to the parables that Jesus told.
Similar to the parables that Jesus told, so it's metaphor. Okay, good. I can't prove you or disprove you, so that's fine. That's fair. Anybody else? Yes. A miracle? All things are possible with God. Could the two of you agree with each other? Agree to disagree?
I agree with her statement.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that too. Anybody else? Something different that hasn't been. Yes, please.
I went and said what I would have been taught in school, which would have been, it's a mystery.
It's a mystery. There you go. That's the third M. Miracle, miracle, metaphor, or mystery. I love it. That's great. I wish I had a gold star to give to you. That's awesome. Well, think this is what I would say. I think, there's truth to the fact that it can be both. Would you agree with that? It could be both. We can't prove or disprove it. That's really important to understand. I wrote this down when you were talking. I wrote, truth is not the same as fact. Do you know what I mean by that? And I use this example all the time. I would be willing to bet most of you know the story of George Washington when he was a boy, and he cut down a cherry tree. Do you remember this? Yeah. And his dad said, what happened? Tell me the rest of the story. George did what? I cannot tell a lie, right? Now, would it surprise you? All know that story? Yeah. Most of us do, if not all of us. Would it surprise you if I told you that story, we have no historical evidence that it ever happened? So why is it something that George Washington lived over 250 years ago? Why do we all still know it if it didn't happen historically? Because truth is not always fact. There is truth in the story. And what's the truth? That you accept personal responsibility, that you don't lie. And those two truths are worth telling kids that story so that they know how to live. Does that make sense? So could this happen? Absolutely. All things are possible with God. Could it be metaphor because there's a lesson to be learned? Absolutely. Because God teaches through fables or parables, as you said. So I think both could be true depending on the perspective that you're looking at it. So I think that's a good way to think about it maybe. Anybody else? Any last thoughts about that question? I love the mystery thing. I'm gonna add that, write that down. The only problem I have with you saying is that I didn't think of it first. It's a great thing. I'm going to show you a few pieces of art because, like I said, I love teaching through art. If you want to buy this, by the way, it's probably about this big, about the size of a small bread box, and it's only like $15,000. So what I was thinking is taking up a collection so I could put it in my office. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. But isn't it kind of neat? It's a neat thing. I don't know if you saw the news about a month ago. Within the last month, it was on Good Morning America and stuff, there was a father and a son who were kayaking off the coast of Chile. Somebody hear about that? Were you talking about this? Yes. They were kayaking off the coast of Chile, and there were whales, and so the dad had his video out, and he was videotaping these whales, and one of them comes up and swallows the son, kayak and all, goes down, and then he comes right back up. He was in the mouth of this fish for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. It wasn't a long time. And then they interviewed the guy, of course, and it's like, oh, I didn't know what was going to happen and all that kind of stuff. But it's fascinating because there's a marine biologist that they interview, and this is what I'm going to say. Whales cannot swallow anything bigger than a tennis ball. Their throats aren't big enough. They eat shrimp, they eat krill, very small things, and they scoop up large quantities and they take it in. But if it's anything bigger than that, it's like they instinctively know their throat can't take a human, so they just spew it out right away. So that's whales. Remember, it's a big fish, not a whale. And listen, I'm not a biologist, but I looked this up. The other thing that they will tell you, marine biologists will tell you, is that there's no oxygen in the belly of a whale. So how are you living for 3 days if it's a whale as opposed to a big fish, right? So it's something to think about. So it goes back to that question, is it a whale or is it a large fish, So here's a piece of art from a sketch artist named Gustave Doré from the 19th century. He does a lot of different sketches of Old and New Testament stories so that we can see them visually. And I don't know how easy it is for you to see this, but the fish is just, spewed out Jonah on the shore there, and he's like merrily going on his way. Now, remember what I asked you about the storm, that God controlled the storm, right? Because as soon as he got Jonah, what happens to the storm, right? What else is God controlling in this story? The fish, right? He's controlling the fish to do this thing, to take Jonah in so that Jonah can maybe learn a lesson. Here's another piece of art that I absolutely love. And I'm going to ask you to interpret this. This is a different image, and hopefully you can see it okay. What would you say about this? Anything stick out to you? Anything that you think is interesting about this? I'll ask you, why do you think he's nude? What might that mean? Where's it? Well, he has some kind of like wrapping around him, but for the most part, he's nude. What might that mean? What metaphorically, what might that mean? Rebirth. You come out nude, right? You come into this world naked with no clothes on. And so here is Jonah being reborn, if you will, to start anew. Okay? What else might nudity imply? It could be sinful, yeah. I would think that in this case, maybe it's if you're naked, you're vulnerable. And that's what he is. He is completely dependent on God at this point because God's the one who had him in the fish and God's the one that freed him from the fish. So that's an important thing too to think about. What do you think about his hand gestures? Give glory to God. What did you say? Surrender. The oran's position when the priest does this, the sign of offering, I'd assume here I am, in Latin, here I am. It could be any of those kinds of things. Or he could be a football fan signaling touchdown. We don't know. It's probably not what he's doing because he looks kind of upset. Exactly, he's trying to catch himself before he slams into the side of the shore there, whatever that is that he's going to be up against. So when you think about it, I think about all of those things are possible given what we know about Jonah. And of course, if you're in the belly of the whale for 3 days, you're probably going to have to deal with, your wife wondering, where have you been? Yeah, you've been gone for 3 days. Yes. Yeah, how long was he out at sea? You're right. He was on the boat too, so it's more than 3 days. But I'm hoping that doesn't cause a rift between you husbands and wives tonight. It's like, but I just thought that was a funny way to do it. So, what I'm going to do is say at this point, I'm going to say thanks for being here. We're done with the first 2 chapters. I'm going to leave some time for question and answers here. But then tomorrow we're going to get into chapters 3 and 4, and I might ask you 2 things. Number one, I'm hoping you'll come back tomorrow if you do bring friends, but bring your booklet because we're going to read through it again and there are more questions and that kind of stuff. So that's your homework is to bring your booklet back. And I'm going to ask you or challenge you not to read chapter 3 and 4. Even if you know the ending of the story, don't read it. You might. That's called a teaser. So I got to go back to figure out what happened, to find out how it ends. But 3 and 4 we'll look at tomorrow. So bring back your booklet and we'll go through that there. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything? Please.
So you were comparing Jonah to Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
What's the timeline of when it was written?
The Psalms were written they were collected over about 1,000 years, from 1400 to 400 BC. And Jonah is probably around 500-600 BC. So he would have had many of them he would have been familiar with. Absolutely. Maybe not all of them, but the good majority of the 150 Psalms he would have had access to mentally. He would have known them. In the same way that you would know, if I asked you to pray the Hail Mary, could you do it? Or Lord's Prayer? I would be willing to bet many of you haven't read those prayers in years, if at all. Most of us were taught our prayers by just repeating them over and over again, which is how they got to know the Psalms so well. They just repeated them. Again, if it's a time of something, someone just dies in your family or someone's going through, you're going to read Psalm 88. Lord, I'm in the pit. Help me out. I'm overwhelmed. And if it's a time of praise and stuff, you're going to read, hey, thank you, God, for, defeating my enemies. Now, that's something else. When the psalmist says defeat my enemies, don't think about battles necessarily. Think about the enemies we all have. Procrastination, judgment, anger, right? Guilt. All of those enemies that bog me down. The sins that I tend to go to are the enemies in my life. So when I pray in the Psalms, Lord, save me from my enemies, they've camped around me, I think about it in that terms. What are those sins that are really nagging at my soul that I need deliverance from? Because I can't do it myself, But that's a good question about the Psalms. Anybody else? Questions or comments about anything we've talked about tonight? You were probably wondering, how the heck are we going to stretch 2 chapters out in one night, right? But we did it. And it's going to even be harder with 3 and 4 because there's so much there to unpack tomorrow. But I have faith in this. Any other comments or questions? No? Yeah, please, sir.
Do we know how big
How big he was? No, that's a good question. We don't. I would venture to say that people back then aren't as healthy as we are, so he probably wouldn't have been anywhere near as tall, I could imagine. So he would have been a little bit more diminutive, I suppose, in size, but we have no knowledge of anything about his physical stature at all. You know, it's interesting, the name Jonah only appears one other time in the whole Bible. It's in the Old Testament, and it's one sentence in 1 Kings. And we don't know if it's this Jonah or it's just another Jonah. We have no idea. So we don't know anything about the guy other than he comes in this story, and this story ends, and that's it. That's all you hear. Good question. Sorry, I can't answer it. I can make something up if you'd like. He was about 5'8", and I like to think he was bald. We don't have enough bald people in our church, you know. We don't. I'm on a mission. Anybody else? Any thoughts about this? Did this make sense? Can you see some of your own lives in this in terms of, boy, I'm not always open to the will of God. Sometimes I will figuratively or literally run away from the will of God for what I know is right, what I should be doing, what God calls me to do. You know, and that's a tough thing. And that sometimes is the creation of my own storms. I get in trouble because I'm doing what I know is wrong. How do I get out of that? Sometimes it's hard to get out of that unless I rely on God to help me get through it, you know. Nothing else. Okay, well, ending a little bit early. I hope that's okay. I didn't know.
It's good because I invite all of you. We have just some very light refreshments because it's Lent, and so we didn't go crazy on you. Have a cookie. Sit at some tables. We set some tables out for discussion. You know, that bring your books with you. Talk about the questions that Al proposed with some other people that you weren't sitting next to. Find out if you hear different answers. This is also, this was live streamed. I don't know if did you know that? Okay.
Yeah.
And so surprise. No.
Yeah, I didn't know that was going to happen. I hope my hair was okay.
If you have people that you want to bring tomorrow night, it'll be online. They can watch that this evening before they come tomorrow night.
Oh.
And even if they don't watch it,
we'll recap what happened. All the fun we had tonight. We'll recap first thing tomorrow.
Yeah. So would you please join me in thanking Al, and please stay.
Thank you.
For some fellowship. Thank you, everybody.
Hope I'll see you tomorrow night. Okay. Mystery. I'm writing it.